Have you ever seen those people, the ones that seem to be living a life that you've always wanted, and as they go along, they're very happy doing it? How would you like to be one of those people? Listen to today's episode and we can get a start on that path. Welcome to Mystical Journeys with Jase. Hello, everybody, and welcome back. I wanted to do a special episode on a concept that's used a lot called follow your bliss. I figured this is probably a good time to do this episode, especially since recently I did the Who Am I series. So, what I wanted to do is talk to you about people that I've known who follow their bliss. Let's go ahead and start with what that actually means, following your bliss. Over the years, I bet you ran into people who, where the thing that they're doing just seems to be the thing that they really enjoy doing. They might seem like they're living their lives effortlessly and everything's perfect and everything just flows for them because this is the thing that they have always wanted to do with their life and they ended up doing it. Now, let's take a look at this for a little bit. You've seen these people. Some of them are on YouTube, and it seems like they're leading these lives with no real effort whatsoever. But let's actually have a talk about this. And I'm going to give some examples of some people that are actually out there following their bliss. All right, let's get to the first part here. What does it mean to follow your bliss? Okay, my first example I'm going to use is from one of my mentors from long ago, and his name was Greg. And like might have mentioned in another podcast, Greg was a dowser. Now, I'm going to explain that in a future episode, but let me just say this. One thing about Greg that I really enjoyed was his core essence was following what he really liked to do, and which was using a pendulum and dowsing. His job, his circle of friends, his life, basically all of it went back to some form of what he was doing. There was always some support in his dowsing by the friends and family that he had around him. Anyhow, I can't say that I knew all the jobs that he had before. I knew he had had a few, but eventually in his life, he tuned his life in such a way that the very thing that was at his core essence became the very thing that he was following on a regular basis. And he was structured enough that he was actually able to make a living doing it as well. Now, let's take a look at the actual concept of following your bliss and these people who seem to live effortlessly following it. There's one lady that I saw on YouTube, and she's doing something called van life. She's out there driving all over the country with her dog, living in the van. Now, to other people, one of the first things you notice, you think, wait a second here, I can do that. But what I want to talk about as far as following your bliss is that when you're following your core essence, it doesn't mean that it comes without challenges. There are times where she's struggling to find a place to park. There are times when she's in a location where she takes her dog out for a walk and the dog could run off into the woods. There's always challenges associated with a life, no matter what. And in those challenges, because they're part of the concept of following your bliss, it makes you want to push through those challenges even more. See, many of us are doing jobs. Yes, we're doing jobs we kind of like, but even doing those jobs that we kind of like, there's still challenges with those compared to the challenges of doing something you truly enjoy. So, the first item on the list is following your bliss means you can follow your heart. You can follow your soul's desire, but it's you're still going to come with some challenges, and you must be willing to push through those challenges. Okay, let's get to the second part here. Identifying your core essence. All right. One of the most important things about this, if you've already identified your core essence, like we worked on in the last series, you're going to find a lot of those things you've been wanting to do already showing up in your life. You might be a person who likes helping people. You end up in the nursing field. And maybe you're doing a job that's the thing that you're following your bliss with. You enjoy helping people. You might like to work with a certain group of people. Let me give an example. I knew a lady who was a nurse who just loved working with the younger generation. Everywhere she lived, she could find kids all the time, even though they were dealing with lots of challenges on their own. It didn't matter whether she was at a hospital, it didn't matter whether she was a substitute nurse at a school, things like that. Even though they were dealing with lots of challenges on their own, she loved to brighten their day. Now, let's look at that. She either knew or didn't know her core essence, but in the end, she was actually following it. So, what I'm going to ask you to do is think about that for a second. Take your time. And after you've discovered your core essence and you've worked out your self statement from the last episode, start looking at your life and see, hey, maybe I might want to make a few changes in my life so that it's a little more in alignment with my core essence. Here's a second thing I want you to consider, and you can use this statement. Now that I understand more about my core essence, what adjustments would I like to make today to be in better alignment with who I am? Now, let's think about that for a second. What adjustments can I make right now? A simple adjustment might even be lose a little bit of weight just so you can be a little bit more limber to go about doing some of the things you want to do. Maybe one of the other adjustments is limiting the number of toxic people that are in your life. That way, you end up having a little bit more space for the good ones to be in your life. I think it's important to realize that life is a series of adjustments. And after a series of adjustments, that's where you find the changes in life. All right, let's get on to the next section here. Part 3, living your bliss. Okay, so let's start talking about living your bliss. Now, I can only comment from my own life, but I can probably give you some comments from people that I've known as well. So let's go ahead and take a look at my own life here for a second, and then we'll get on to others. Years ago, I started following and learning about all kinds of open minded information, and I figured out that I love to share it with people. Going along and smiles on people's faces and all the people that I've been able to help, I have to say, I really enjoyed a lot of that. Now, think about that for a second. I didn't realize at the time that I was already going to be doing that particular thing. My life started to invite those things that were helpful for me to be able to follow that bliss. And I ended up doing several jobs over the years, and I traveled extensively. And yes, a lot of my friends still remember all those years of me traveling. What ended up happening because of that traveling was I ended up meeting a lot of people who supported me on my path. They were very encouraging and gave me some great ideas to continue going. So, what I was going to say was, I met so many people who were willing to support me on my path and just say, keep going. And I also met people who said, boy, I wish I could do that. And you know what that ended up doing for me? I did what I could do to help them as well. So, one of my important statements to you is as follows: when you are starting to follow your bliss, your life will start to take some course corrections that help to support that bliss. Let me give you an example of somebody that over the years, off and on, I would check in on. There was a gentleman a long time ago, and I was up at this campground, and it was basically open microphone night. I was sitting there with a bunch of friends where it was really nice gathering of people. Well, what that meant with the open mic night is that anybody could come up. If they wanted to sing, they could go ahead and sing. And they basically have an open microphone. There were some people who sang a song or did a little poetry reading or something like that. It was a really nice and a very fun thing. Well, this one gentleman's he stepped up, and his name was David. And when he stepped up, he brings a violin with him. And I'm kind of like, okay, this is kind of interesting. We're at a campground, and here's this guy who brought his violin with him. Okay. So, and he says, hey, everyone, my name is David, and here I am. In a minute, he starts playing his violin, and little by little, I guess he had used a piece of equipment that could echo things, and little by little, it made so many sounds as though there were 4 or 5 violins going on at the exact same time. All right, I have got to say, I was mesmerized by this. Yes, I really was blown away by this. Well, over the years, he would come back to the campground and he ended up teaching a class or two on some things. I would listen to him speaking about how he followed his bliss. And what I've been gathering, he's been traveling all over the country. And if I remember correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, but as I recall, he did some shows in Las Vegas. He's also been to an event called Burning Man. He showed up at events up in New York that I ran into him. This man who started off doing something that he loved ended up finding some creativity in it and was able to start to express that to everybody. And him following that bliss is supporting his path. If you'd like to follow him, look him up. His name is David Dixon. I think it's under Dixon's Violin. I'm going to say he is well worth listening to. All right. So let's talk about your bliss a little bit more. Let's take a look at a couple of different things here. First off, whatever your bliss is, it may not be like others, and that's okay. You may have something you've always wanted to do, where you crochet. You may, where you just enjoy flying an airplane. You may have very core things inside you that you don't even know why just yet, but you decide to follow them in this lifetime. I got a question about one point about this. People would ask me, what was my opinion on why that there's something inside them that causes them to go forward to do something compared to others? Here's a really good example of one. There's a lady that I follow on YouTube, and her name is Lauren Landers, and she has a sailboat. And the sailboat she has sailed around the Caribbean. I'm not going to tell you the rest of her story because if you follow her story, I got to say it's pretty fascinating. But let me just say this. Here's what's really interesting. She's from Missouri. Now, that's not exactly the shining center of sailing activities in the world, but here she is. She started her videos with a whole bunch of videos of her sailing around the Caribbean following her bliss. Now, keep in mind, her bliss is different than yours. It's definitely different from mine. Where does some of that energy come from? I can only answer with my opinion. You're going to find that there's probably some type of other lifetime bias that caused you to take a look at that. You may or may not believe it. It could be a past lifetime bias. Maybe when you were younger and you just happen to see something that somebody else does, and then you really ended up enjoying doing it. You might end up developing it as you go along in life. You start to find out here's something you're doing as far as a woodworking skill. And then all of a sudden, you transfer it into something else, like carving marble or something like that. Do you see what I mean? There's several ways you can end up following your bliss, and there's several reasons why you might be following your bliss. All right, here's some key takeaways here. Let's hit a few high points very quick. First point, as you learn to better understand your core nature, it makes it a lot easier to follow that bliss. Second, there's going to be some challenges that are probably associated with following that bliss. And I'm going to ask you, what are you willing to do to overcome them? Third, when you follow that bliss, it may look to other people that that bliss causes you to live your life effortlessly. But let me say this, the real effort that you put into following your bliss, it's absolutely worth it. And by following that core nature, you're going to help inspire others and you're going to begin to live the life that you've always wanted to live. All right. I always get this from a couple listeners. They love the homework. So here goes your homework for this week. All right. Let's get to wrapping all this up. I want you to go back to the other 3 episodes that I recently did on Who Am I series. And I'd like you to walk through those again if you haven't. And maybe if you have, maybe it might be worth a listen. Get an idea of that core statement again and take a look at your life right now and think about that. What are some very simple things you can do that could help you adjust your life a little bit? This way, you're a little closer towards following those things in your heart. That's what I'd like you to do this week. I want you to take some time and just see, hey, can I make a little bit of an adjustment here? Watch what happens after you make that adjustment. You're going to notice, hey, I feel a little bit more in alignment with my life's purpose. I feel more in alignment with my core statement. That's the homework I have for you this week. Take some time thinking through it. And don't forget that, like, if you sign up on the website, I'm more than happy to send you a copy of the workbook I made for the last 3 episodes for Who Am I? All right, everybody. I hope you have a wonderful, blissful week. Don't forget to tell a friend about this podcast. This way you have something kind of cool to talk about. And you know what? I got a great idea. Tell that friend a little bit about your bliss and see if they might be able to help you with some advice, some ideas, or something like that. Okay. Always keep curious. Thank you for listening.